Hello. I want to talk about so-called Elbowgate, Justin Trudeau, Canadian politics, and double standards. Those are the main issues I want to focus on in this video. Firstly, a quick word about Mr. Trudeau. Obviously, the new Prime Minister of Canada. He has enjoyed something of a honeymoon period. I think he is genuinely popular in terms of democratic politics as democratic politics go. By democratic, I'm talking about the democratic system in the Western world. Um, he has garnered more media attention in 9 months than Stephen Harper did in 9 years in the British media. Seems almost every day there's another story about Justin Trudeau. So far, he's had good relations with President Obama, and he's made quite an impact, I would say, on Canadian politics. His critics say that we have elected a social justice warrior, and yeah, they're obviously not a fan of that. Personally, I'm not a massive fan of Mr. Trudeau on the grounds that I think he is another example of a progressive who kind of assumes a moral high ground on issues. I find sometimes there's a slight smugness to his demeanour. That's just how it comes across. I'm not saying he is smug. I'm just saying it comes across that way sometimes, as sort of like holier than thou attitude. That's how it comes across to me. And I didn't appreciate the fact that when he was going on about how proud he is to be a feminist, he's kind of implying that other men should be as well. I've never taken kindly to that. But anyway, that's that. Yesterday in Ottawa, maybe the day before now, there was a bill on assisted dying, which is an important issue. And there was a little bit of a cluster of MPs gathering around opposition MPs. And Trudeau lost his temper because it was taking time. Presumably, it was holding up the bill. So he barged over and he basically intervened. And this was the side of Trudeau, I guess, that is less sane, as he usually seems like a very calm, collected character. He barged over and he supposedly manhandled the opposition whip, Gord Brown. Um, and during this situation, he also elbowed NPD MP Ruth Brosseau. Not sure how her name is pronounced. But basically, this situation has been really, really blown into something much bigger than I think it merits. I've watched the video a few times, and clearly the elbowing situation was accidental. Clearly. And I think any level headed, reasonable person who watches that could see it was. Now, the opposition are making this into a massive issue. Immediately there were shouts of, "What sort of man elbows a woman?" So there was an intervention by the Speaker. Justin Trudeau got up. He unreservedly apologised. He explained the situation. I thought that I felt someone behind me, but if anyone feels they were hurt, I unreservedly apologised. Not good enough. They kept talking about it, and one MP even was yelling, he calls himself a feminist. Real feminists don't do this. Ah. And basically, they're making him out to be this woman beating monster. Now, I have to say, this is one of the most pathetic attempts at political opportunism I have ever seen. And this basically defines milking a situation for political purposes. Subsequently, there's been a huge backlash against those who are making this into a bigger issue than it is. And even some of those who are not in Trudeau's party are calling out for what it is. To her credit, Elizabeth May has said that people should move on from so-called Elbowgate. It is a non-issue. They need to move on. And I agree with her. But the opposition isn't letting this rest. Ruth Brosseau certainly isn't letting this rest. She's now talking about how women are frightened to enter Parliament. Give me a break. Seriously. If that's how you handle this sort of situation, how are you going to handle, I don't know, the Toronto subway at rush hour, or London Underground at rush hour, or any other crowded situation where people naturally get jostled around? It's I get it, okay. being elbowed can be painful, but I think people reasonably expect a certain level of level-headedness with this. He apologized. He clearly done this accidentally. He apologized. What more do you want? I mean, for her to make out that she's a victim, I think is insulting actual victims of molestation. And that's the term the opposition is now using. I read a report yesterday about a man who actually forced his girlfriend onto a treadmill to the point of exhaustion. He would physically kick her if she didn't achieve the targets of the sort of body he wanted. That is an example of actual abuse. This accident was not. And what irritates me about this is the blatant double standards that are involved. I do think that Trudeau was out of line going over and manhandling the whip. But of course, you can count on feminists not to care about that. Um, so, in other words, the person he actually does deliberately touch, oh, that's fine because that's a man. No one's going to make a big issue out of that. But the woman he accidentally touches, then it's the fall of the Commonwealth of Canada. It's the biggest political scandal since Watergate. It's massive. I've even heard them saying it's unparalleled in Canadian political history. Maybe it is, but if you look around the world, if you look at South Korea, Turkey, any other parts of the world, and I'm not saying this is something that should be the norm, but you see mass brawls breaking out. This really was, when you look in the grand scheme of things, a non-issue. And look at the bill that was being put forward. It's a bill on assisted dying, a serious issue, a very complex emotional issue that impacts a lot of people. That should be the main issue garnering the news in Canadian politics right now, not a woman accidentally being elbowed. And she's making herself out to be a traumatized victim. You know what bothers me? And this is going to be a controversial point, but someone has to say it. There does tend to be a tendency, and it happens very much in the UK as well, that when certain women MPs don't get their own way, and that's very plausible in this situation because she's from an opposition party, they will absolutely pander to the victimhood tag as much as they can. So how is this consistent with saying women are just as strong as independent as men? I have news for you. A man that is accidentally elbowed would move on. The fact is, the majority of men would not make this out to be an issue as big as this. And there's blatant double standards here. On one hand, people will say, feminists will say, oh, women can be strong and independent minded and they can do anything men can do. And yet, as soon as there's something that's supposedly hurts a woman, even though it's a blatant accident, then it's like wrapping women in cotton wool. It's treating them like complete helpless little girls. And it's feminists that completely fuel that. You can't have it both ways. You can't say women are strong and independent and could do anything men could do, but then hold double standards to something that men simply wouldn't make such an issue of. Male MPs, and this is the case in the UK, get called names all the time. But whenever it happens to happen to a woman, then, oh, it's sexism parliament. It's how misogynistic and patriarchal our parliament is and how awful for these poorer women. Give me a break. Give me a break. Anybody in politics needs tough skin. It's an underlying fact with being an MP. Now, instead of accepting the apology, they're just continuing this situation. They're now saying that women are frightened to enter parliament. Give me a break. Really. They're making out that Justin Trudeau was some sort of woman beating monster. This is disgraceful misuse of the concept. It's just a complete nonsense. And if I was one of her constituents, I would frankly feel rather annoyed that she wasn't just getting on with her job, that she was making it all about herself. So she has basically hijacked a bill on assisted dying. If I was someone involved in, let's say I had a relative who was terminally ill and I had to make that sort of choice, I would be pretty peeved off that it had been hijacked by this issue. And I'm sorry, but there is a track record of women in politics using the fact that they're a woman to basically, make that an issue when they don't get their own way. Politics is tough, and there should be a situation where people can disagree without constantly. I think men in politics have to tread in eggshells because all they have to do is disagree with a woman. They'll potentially be accused of talking down to her or being a sexist. Seriously, feminists, get over yourselves. This is pathetic. I have to say, though, there's irony in this. And maybe it will be a wake up call for the Prime Minister. He proudly calls himself a feminist. Well, Mr. Trudeau, you get what you asked for. This is what feminism is. So the next time you call on other men to be feminists, maybe, look at the way you've been treated. That's all I'm saying. Um, so really, I think this is hugely overblown. And I will say this, I think the women who do most well in politics are precisely those who don't use their identity as a woman. They do not use a demographic to play politics. It is the most cynical, pathetic, opportunistic thing I can think of. The same applies for anyone who uses any sort of demographic to basically play the victimhood mentality. I, I get that sometimes there's genuine bullying in Parliament, and in situations where it's clear cut and it is out of line, then I don't condone that. But I do think that this is far too often blown out of proportion, and there has to be robust debate in democratic systems. But how can there be robust debate when Parliament is acting the same way as pathetic left wing student unions, where they're basically talking about being traumatized and being victimized? This is nonsense. I'm someone who hates genuine bullying, but I really, really don't think this is the case. And I think it hijacks important issues of the day. I think it hijacks what these people are meant to be doing in Parliament, which is serving their constituents. So that's a few of my thoughts on this. What I was going to say is those women who do most well are those who don't basically use their demographic as a point of order. Look at some of the strongest women who've been involved in politics: Margaret Thatcher, Indira Gandhi, Golda Meir. Um, I'm not so sure about Indira Gandhi and Golda Meir, but as far as I know, they did not use the fact that they were women to say, woe is me. They were strong, genuinely strong, successful leaders who got ahead because they were strong, successful leaders. And I'm not saying, by the way, that I'm a Thatcherite. I'm not saying I agree with their politics. I'm just saying they survived the political world. They done well. They got ahead because they did not use that demographic. Um, Anyone who's truly egalitarian would hold exactly the same standards to men and women. So why is it that feminists are now saying this is awful because she is a woman? The very same people would say, oh, don't talk down to her. She's a strong woman who's representing her constituents in Parliament. You can't have it both ways. You just can't. And like I say, if she was hurt, if she was genuinely hurt, then okay, get the Speaker to intervene, which he done. The Prime Minister apologised. It should be over with that. I could understand this rumbling on if he refused to apologise, but he didn't. He done the right thing. He apologised. That should be it. So if the MPD, faces a backlash from this, there's no one to blame but themselves, because this is one of the most cynical attempts to slander a man that I have ever seen, and I'm not even a Trudeau fan. It's pathetic. I even saw someone in the comments saying, I absolutely hate Trudeau, but I'm an honest person. It was an accident. And that basically sums up the situation. So let me know your thoughts, especially if you're from Canada. I have to say the consensus that I've been seeing is that absolutely 99% of comments have been supporting Trudeau and saying this is massively blown out of proportion. I looked at the NDP website, people who have been lifelong members saying they think this is pathetic, and they're even leaving the party. So I think this is seriously backfiring, and I think before they continue final point, like I say, they're continuing to push this victimhood sort of logic. What she's now complaining about is that, oh, I've been trolled online. You're not being trolled online. What you're seeing is a lot of criticism of the fact that you're exploiting this situation. So once again, she's going to turn that into a victimhood situation. So she's basically setting up a situation whereby anyone who criticizes her, especially if they're male, will be presented as this horrible, bullying, sexist pig. And it's utterly cynical. I mean, if you can't handle the heat of politics, you shouldn't be in politics. And I'm sorry to be so blunt about that, but it's the truth. Politics is it's a tough endeavor. That's what it is. You need tough skin for this. Let's say someone like her ever had aspirations to be prime minister. How could she sit down and negotiate with someone like Vladimir Putin if she can't handle an accident in parliament? I think that's a legitimate point. So let me know your thoughts. If you think I'm wrong, I'll be happy to engage in civil debate. I just think that there is a track record of some women in parliament basically using their gender to, and we definitely see it in the UK. It's happened many times in the UK, and it is blatant double standards. Because on one hand, you can't demand that women are treated equally to men if you're not prepared to behave equally to men. It's just total double standards.